So this is my very first time of interviewing a guest expert. So I'm here today with Feidhlim, who is the author of the new book, Towards Zero Waste. Would you mind introducing yourself, talking a bit about the book and your journey into zero waste living?
Sure. Where to start? Yeah, my name is Feidhlim, Feidhlim Harty, and I'm an environmental consultant based in the west of Ireland. And I suppose I started business 20 years ago trying to answer the question, well, what can I do? What can I do to make a difference? So the book is the fourth one in a line of books that are still trying to answer that question and share some of the solutions, share some of the answers. So what I do, my day-to-day work is designing reed bed systems and wetlands and willow systems. So you get to clean up water in a way that mops up nitrogen, phosphorus, mops up water, and also sequesters carbon, depending on the technology. So it's a kind of a closed loop approach. And Towards Zero Waste was a kind of an obsession. It started out with a book called Get Rid of Your Bin, but it was published 10 years ago. And that was leftover notes from a course that never got taught in my school. And I had this big bundle of notes prepared for a night course that I would teach. And when the night course didn't run, I thought, well, I might as well just bind them and publish them. So naturally enough, it wasn't quite that easy, but I pulled it together into a book form and published it. And actually, surprisingly, 10 years later, there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of new stuff going on. So Towards Zero Waste is, it takes from some of the old material and Get Rid of Your Bin. And it also looks at a lot of the newer things that have been happening over the last 10 years. The whole climate strike issue, the whole issue of climate breakdown is much, much more in the public eye. And the link between that and stuff, that if we frack gas, it's got a higher carbon footprint than coal, because of the fracking methodology. And then using fracked gas to make plastics to then throw away just doesn't really work all that well, naturally enough. So that connection between climate breakdown and plastic waste is there. The whole issue of plastics in the oceans is much more real for people than it was 10 years ago. So, and I think there's a greater awareness as well that recycling really isn't where it's at all. That we need to just realize that recycling isn't a solution to the waste problem that we have and to climate breakdown. With only 9% of plastics recycled globally, we can't keep on relying on that and pretending that we can recycle our way out of a problem that is founded in manufacture. We just need to stop manufacturing virgin plastics as a matter of urgency. So and to get away from the idea that we can recycle our way out of the problem. So in our own household, we've had a kind of an evolution of plastic reduction over the years and waste reduction generally, but it kind of boils down to fairly straightforward stuff. Just shopping minimally where possible, not using retail therapy as a a solution to mental health. So and just composting everything and all the usual stuff, all the stuff you're doing, and it's great to see all of that. So that's me, and that's where I'm at. And Towards Zero Waste, I have a copy here. That's the one.
Oh, amazing. That must be such a proud feeling to be able to,
It's lovely. It's really nice. Yeah, and they did a lovely, the cover is beautiful. They did a really good job with the cover and permanent
absolutely
publication.
Great. So let's go back 20 years. So I was 6 and had no idea about zero waste living, but you cancelled your bin collection. Talk to me about that, because that is impressive.
Let me see. Well, 20 years ago, I started business. I looked at the two options. One was to go into activism and one was to go into business. And I reckoned, well, if I went into activism, I'd need to earn a living somehow. So I might as well go into business and be an activist in my business.
Yeah.
So that was the decision that was taken at the time. In terms of the bin collection, yeah, it probably was about 20 years ago. We did. My wife, then girlfriend and I looked at one another and said, well, we don't have much waste. Why are we paying for a bin collection? So it just didn't make sense at all to have a bin collection because of the tiny amounts that we had. And we're not at zero. that's not something that we've achieved, or even, I mean, we've moved in that direction, but we've never tried to have zero waste, because, to be fair, there's too many other things in life that I want to do. And as you know, I mean, as you've really grappled with it yourself, it's a full-time job. So I reckon if I can get 90% of the way there, I can use a lot of that other time for other things like writing books and, doing reed bed systems and wetlands. And I think that it's really important to push for change as well. That, I can get right down to zero if I try hard, and it can take all of my time, but nothing will really change. Whereas if I really push at government level, in the media, all that kind of stuff, even if I only get my own rubbish down to 80 or 90% reduction, then if I manage to make any changes in the legislation or policy, that can have huge sweeping changes for the whole country. So that's kind of where I pushed it. And in terms of our own bin, yeah, we cancelled our bin because we just didn't have very much. And then we just stored what was produced and brought it to the local recycling centre or the local dump every so often. Yeah, it didn't feel like a big heroic thing at the time.
It's very impressive. So has your family grown and developed over that point? And has that ever had a knock-on effect?
It has. It means that when we go on holidays, or when the girls were small, when they were in nappies, it meant that when we went on holidays, we took a real break and we bought eco-friendly disposable nappies, which, we were just using the shaped cloth nappies up to then. So it was just nice to have a complete break and use
a real holiday treat.
A real holiday treat, exactly. And buying food out of a jar and things like that. But most of the time it's fine. I mean, they're certainly, when you've got, we found that when we had the kids, that certainly there's more stuff that comes into the house. But a lot of it actually does the rounds. You've got baby clothes that do the rounds from one family to the next, and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't need to be either a huge spending spree or a huge waste spree. But they're both into it too.
Yeah, that's brilliant then. Yeah. So I'm now going to ask you a question that I always get asked, and I'm so glad to be able to ask this to someone else. So I want to know what your first zero waste switch was. Like, what was the one thing that kind of started it all off?
Let me see. I don't know if I can answer your question directly, I'm afraid, but I know that the reason why I looked at zero waste first was that the Irish government was rolling out an incinerator plan, and they basically said, okay, we need incinerators to burn all the waste because there isn't enough space in landfill. And I grew up in an area downwind of Cork Harbour, which is one of the more industrialised parts of Ireland. It's, not a particularly to be downwind of a municipal waste and a toxic waste incinerator, as well as everything else that was there, the other manufacturing industries in Cork Harbour. So that would have been Darks and all that stuff, and there's clusters and that kind of thing around various parts of East Cork. And, there seems to be a correlation between that and industry in the harbour. So for me, it was more asking the question, what can I do to completely circumvent the government's incineration plan and just not provide them with fuel for their incinerators? So that was what prompted the writing of the first book, which is Get Rid of Your Bin, which is basically, if we don't put bins out for collection on a weekly basis, there simply won't be any to burn, and thus we won't have new incinerators. It didn't change the whole tree overnight, unfortunately, but I'm still plugging away, and more people are becoming aware of it, and aware of the issues with plastic and climate change. The conversation, I think, shifted globally from one of air pollution to climate change and biodiversity loss and plastics in the oceans. So the motivations may have shifted, but the root solutions, if you like, are identical. So that was, yeah, I got into it through incinerator campaigns.
Nice. So the title of your book is To Get Rid of Your Bin. Well, your previous book. How many bins do you think you've stopped being used? Like, how over the years? It must be thousands of people that you have encouraged to say, I don't need my bin anymore.
I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't bet on it. I really, really don't know. It would be lovely to think that it was more than 10, you know?
It could be such a huge number, couldn't it?
And I think that it's...
Have you ever had a situation where you've been trying to lower waste, like intentionally lower waste, and the complete opposite has happened? And I guess... Yes. Yeah. We've all got situations like that, haven't we?
Yeah,
so
I have. Well,
what was it like?
The most recent one was just keeping stuff that shouldn't be kept. You know, there was a damaged can in the cupboard recently that I wanted to keep, and I put it on top of the top shelf of the cupboard, and sure enough, it leaked and dripped down over a paper bag of wonderful British-grown pulses that we'd bought, and it didn't get through all of the layers. You know, we were fine. We were able to package it in jars, but it's a really, really clear case of my tendency to just hang on, and that really going amok. You know, so yeah, there's certainly examples there. Yeah, you sound as if that question comes from bitter experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there have been many times where I've gone to shops purposely with a reusable container, and they've used the single-use item to get my food into the container, but it's just all a conversation, isn't it? Like, it's explaining with grace why you didn't want that to happen, but then also reflecting on how better to ask for what you're after in the future. So it's always something to learn from it and to take away from it. That's right. But and I also think it's really helpful to share these stories, because it can be so hard to think, oh, I've made a mistake, and this is awful, and so is much better than me. But it's never really like that, is it? On a day-to-day, when we're trying to lower our waste in a world that is wasteful, so it is. And I find that there's not a lot of value in stressing over it all too much. Completely agree.
So, quite apart from anything else, I'm not the one that does the shopping most of the time. So it's my wife who's the one who is actually responsible for most of the zero waste decisions in the household. And the easiest thing is just not to stress over it. And basically, sure, we have decisions that we make about every item that we buy, but if you can shop in certain shops, it just makes the whole thing an awful lot easier. We've got a local zero waste shop in Ennis, which is wonderful, which is one of the organic shops in town. And, we just go along with our own bags and fill them up and weigh them. And that's fantastic. That sorts out dry goods, pretty much, dry foodstuffs. And then there's a market in Ross7 every Friday morning. And again, very, very similar, nice, easy way to do it. If you just stay out of supermarkets, it makes life so much easier. Whereas if you do go to supermarkets, it's very, very, very difficult to manage to do that and to keep your waste anyway low at all.
Yeah, it's almost like cutting the waste out right at the source is the way to make sure it doesn't come into your home, and then you don't have to deal with it. And absolutely. You've touched on this a little bit before, but I'd just be interested in hearing your thoughts about the main sort of changes in the zero waste movement, because you've been part of it so much longer than I have. So what kind of trends have you noticed? There has been quite a big swell recently, and what do you kind of think where do you think that's come from, I guess? What you,
I suppose the biggest change is that the word exists. If I said I was moving towards zero waste 10, 15, 20 years ago, I'd get funny looks. What? Why? And 20 years ago, it was difficult to get out of a shop without taking a plastic bag, without being escorted by security. So that's that's one thing, you know, whereas the plastic bag tax in Ireland just shifted that conversation overnight. You know, suddenly you weren't even being offered a plastic bag, which is fantastic. So that's made a big change. What else? I suppose I, I, I imagine that the huge upsurge in interest in zero waste probably comes from David Attenborough's his television stuff. You know, that's probably the biggest thing that's pushing people. And we don't have a TV either, so I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And you know, I find myself looking at people who are making these huge changes based on what they've seen on TV and thinking, oh yeah, television exists, doesn't it? And it's got a terrifying power to change people's minds. And when you consider that, you know, one film or a small handful of comments in a backdrop of so much advertising for stuff, then we're kind of snookered. You know, if the biggest agent for change is one of the agents that's most responsible for actually dumping stuff in our bins to begin with. You know, if you consider that television is an advertising tool that's used in order to disseminate stuff, which, you know, in many respects it is, then it's that's kind of worrying, really. So those are, I suppose that's my guess as to why that change has occurred. You know, and also I think people are waking up to the fact that climate breakdown is very, very real and a huge problem. Biodiversity loss is massive.
Zero wasters have a habit of holding on to items for a very long time. So I would be interested to know, what is an item that you've kept a hold of for years and years, maybe an item of clothing or something completely different?
Yeah, there's two things that come to mind. One is that the jacket and trousers that I was married in, my wedding suit, that's still going and still serving me well at every other wedding that comes along. So that was 19 years ago. So that's one that I use all the time. But one of the things that you say is that zero wasters hold on to stuff. I've held on to my stamp collection, which I had since I was in my early teens. Wow. And that's something that I'm just about to let go of to a local wildlife charity here, because it's not really serving me very well. Right. So there's two things about zero waste. One is not to throw stuff out that's still perfectly good, but the other is not to hang on to stuff that's perfectly good that somebody else can get use out of.
Such a good point.
So those are two answers that come to mind.
Absolutely amazing. And in terms of your wedding suit, did you intentionally buy better back when you bought that item in the hopes that it would last, or have you just been really good at keeping good care of it?
I'm not very good at keeping good care of clothing. It's not one of the things that I do well. My work and my gardening style tend to be hard on clothes. So sure, I've taken care with it, but at the time I bought a jacket that was really good. I actually scoured West Cork and bought the only jacket that wasn't blue or that wasn't navy or grey, and so, you know, eventually found one that I liked and snapped it up. There weren't a lot of options, but yes, it was a good quality one at the time. And I've been keeping it carefully, keeping it well.
I love that. I love how sentimental it is and how long it's lasted. That's really nice. So I'm aware that you have a different family setup to me. So it's just me. So I'm in control of travel and food, and it must be harder with a family. So could you give any tips about those sorts of things, like when you're, I guess, either preparing food or preparing a trip, or whichever one you want to discuss? How do you lower waste when there's more people in the house?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that the waste that we have for four is probably not 4 times the waste that I'd have for one. You know, so on the law of averages, we still win. You know, so there's that to consider. Is that it's tricky. You know, there's lots of competing needs, and when we're buying food, we're not just asking the question: is there waste associated with this? Or my internet connection is showing up as being dodgy again. So
I can still hear you fine.
It's not just waste. We're asking: is there an issue with palm oil? Is there an issue with exploitation of animals or farm workers, or are the soils being ripped apart for this particular vegetable product? Is it organic agriculture, or does it use a lot of input from Monsanto? Does it come from the farm next door, or have we shipped it in? Have we shipped in organic avocados from California where they're in the middle of a prolonged drought? So there's lots and lots of questions that go into each purchase of food. Having kids is probably the least worrisome part of that. The biggest challenge is that if everybody's got different dietary requirements, that becomes trickier for cooking. But actually, when it comes to shopping, it's not really a major issue.
That's good. That's good. There's hope. That's fine. Brilliant. Okay, I've really liked our chat. I've found out loads, and I think it's been really great to speak to somebody who has been on the zero waste journey for a lot longer than I have. So obviously we became in contact because I have read your book and done a review for you, but I would love it if you could just let the listeners of this interview know where to get your book. So go for it.
Okay. Well, it's called, as you say, Towards Zero Waste, and it's published by the wonderful crew at Permanent Publications in Hampshire, the people who publish Permaculture magazine. And so you can get it on their website, which if you look up Permanent Publications, you'll find a whole host of permaculture books, which are fantastic. And this is just one of them. Or if you go to my website, wetlandsystems.ie, and find the shop page, it's for sale there as well. And it's also, ask for it in your local bookshop, and they'll probably buy in 5, and you buy 1, and then there's 4 of them there to further the message and spread the word. So thanks for the offer, Charlotte. Lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, and you, thank you so much for your time. That's been really helpful, so thank you very much. And yeah, best of luck, and I hope as many people as possible will read your book, because it's fantastic.
Thanks a million. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. Wonderful to talk to you.
You too.
God bless. Bye now.